Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago, and across the globe. Welcome to Real Talk Corner. Hadassah, how are you?
Hi, I am fine, thank you. How are you, Esther?
Hello, everybody. This is Real Talk Corner, where conversation sparks change and every voice matter. I'm your host, Dr. Esther Cruickshank, and tonight on this very beautiful Tuesday evening, we are here to discuss matters. So let me welcome every one of you to our next episode on this beautiful Tuesday. How was your day? I don't know how yours was, but mine was so complex. I am so exhausted at this point in time. And I am going to be hoping that my co host gets on shortly. Yeah? So, people, just call a friend, share our live, and let someone know that we are on. We want to start the conversation of a conversation that really sparks change in some people's heart and mind. But the truth is, to the African community, we are celebrating our emancipation holiday on Friday coming, which is the 1st of August in Trinidad and Tobago. And I really want to be talking about emancipation. Are we truly emancipated as the African community? Are we understanding who we are, what we can do, the ability that there is for us to make change in our lives, for us to grow as a community, for us to better ourselves, elevate ourselves, stop thinking below the surface and rise to the occasion of limitless transformation, transforming the mind by the renewal of the mind. Stop being chained up by others and by your own self sometimes, and let us grow, let us come together. What do you all think? For too long, the African community has been shallow, begging. Yes, we may get some things based on our persistency and based on how we carry about ourselves. But could I say that sometimes our birthrights are taken from us and it is so hard to restore it or to retrieve it? Right here in Trinidad, and there is something that I would share as we go along from our family perspective and certain things that we are dealing with. I don't want to deal with that tonight, but it is heartbreaking to know that some of us as African people, we have so much wealth in this country. For those who would have sold their birthright and those who would have given it away, some of us didn't. But do you believe that it is so hard to achieve what belongs to you? It is heartbreaking to know that, as African people, sometimes we cannot even get what rightfully belongs to us. And as we celebrate the emancipation of the African community, I really want us to go into a discussion for the whole of the month of August. We're going to be calling it the African Community Month in Trinidad on Real Talk Corner, okay? So I'm going to be having a few speakers that is going to be coming on. I have someone who's an ambassador from Africa as well who's going to be coming on. So we're going to share the flyers and we're going to, let you know what we're going to be talking about with respect to the African community. And, I don't want us to just have a conversation or just talk. I want us to really take a deep breath, self introspection when we have these conversations coming up and pay attention. Listen to me. We are not to be jealous or perturbed or, blasting any other community. The Indian community, the Chinese, the Syrians, the Venezuelans. These people come and have understood what it is to come together and to support one another. Unfortunately, where the African community is concerned, we have been ripped apart. We have been torn apart. We have been set apart by the European government, people that gone before. And it seems as though that type of behavior is still in our genes. It has not yet been flushed out. And I understand, I said it before, and before and before. We are here, our culture was taken away from us. Our food was taken away from us. Our religious background. I mean, I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. But you know, everybody come with a culture, a background, their religious beliefs and whatever, except for the transformation by Christ. But again, that is a personal thing, okay? Now, every other community comes to the Caribbean or wherever they go, with their identity. Unfortunately, the Africans, once they left Africa, once they were pulled in as slaves, once we had a slave master, we were ripped apart from everything that belonged to us. And even in countries like Trinidad and other countries in the Caribbean, but more so Trinidad, we see that whatever we had, what our foreparents did not sold and left for us, that too is being taken away. And it is so difficult to retrieve it. You would not believe. And you know, as we go along in the month of August, based on what happens, I would be sharing some of the unbelievable things that happens to the African community, to those of us who think we have something and we are treated lesser than by the masses of people from the different race and so on. But I want us to know that there is hope. There is hope. If we can only find it in ourselves to come together, to establish one another, to highly establish one another, not with an agenda to please ourselves or just to take ourselves up the ladder and forget about those who have been pushing us or supporting us. You know, there's a saying, and I heard it before, if you push me up the ladder, you are going to be climbing up the ladder as well. Because in order to push me, you have to come up. But you know what we are used to? Crabs in bucket, pulling one another down. And that has been the situation with the African community over the years. But I think it is time, not just think, I know it is time for us to arise. It is time for us to set aside our differences. As a matter of fact, it is time for us to look at the other race, what they have done, how they have done it, and were able to accomplish what they have accomplished, and stop bad talking and stop trying to pull them down because you are failing at doing that. We can't. They have stuck together, the Indian brothers and sisters, the Chinese, the 1%, the Venezuelans, and whoever else you can think about except for the Africans. That race has been able to stick together, to support one another. And what they do, most of them, they use us. And they talk fancy talk and sweet talk to make us feel, for most of them, to make us feel that they care about us, that they want better for us. And the truth of the matter is, most of them, when they say that, they don't mean it. And I'm not just talking because I want to talk. I have experienced it and I know. But the worst part about it is that our own African brothers and sisters sometimes don't want the best for us. Sometimes the worst part is that our African brothers and sisters, are the ones who pulls us down, are the ones who bad talk us, are the ones who say all manner of evil about us instead of coming together and working to achieve a set goal. No, we don't do it. But tonight we want to talk a little bit about some of the woes and some of the misfortunes, because it's not all African people are lazy, as you would hear from time to time. It's not all African people are not able to manage their resources. It's not all African people love to just sleep and do nothing. It's not all. That might be just a few. A lot of us are willing to work. A lot of us, we work for others. We establish other races. Some of these people, for instance, there is the 1% in our country that everybody talks about. They have majority of the businesses. And who works for them? The African people. Okay? So we need to do a mind check. We need to really come to our senses. Stop bringing one another down in the African community. Stop talking about the other race. Let us focus on our race, okay? And let us focus on coming together and doing something that is going to make us better people, make us a better community, a stronger community. And you know, whatever we put our minds to do, it prospers, it will succeed. But the thing is, we just allow, what should I say, jealousy and hatred come in between us and pull down whatever we try to establish. But I think this year, 2025, going forward, we need to do better. Let me welcome my co host as she has joined us. Hi, Hadassah. How are you?
Hi, Esther. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. It is great to be on another episode of Real Talk on Alive. Um, are we going to be having a holiday this weekend?
Yes, on Friday is Emancipation Day, so it's a
I should know
holiday.
this. I'm so sorry.
No, you don't need to
I
be
have a
sorry, it
boss.
happens.
I forget because I have a boss who does not care about our little Trinidadian holidays. But yes, I'm glad we're having this conversation. And I always try to broach these topics um, in a way that tells all of the story because I feel like the collective experience of Afro Trinbagonians or anybody who has come from a colonial background, which meant that they were also enslaved, I feel like there are not enough conversations, there are not enough studies to talk about the enduring psychological effects and what it has done to us as a people. And I try to be very nuanced when I talk about things like this, um, because the last thing that I want to do is make excuses. But I feel like um, if anybody has an excuse, it is people of the African diaspora. The reason why I say that is because you find that people who are from Nigeria and Ghana and whatnot, people who have grown up in their homeland, even when they move to other countries, they might move to the UK for a better life or wherever they may find themselves, they are still very much connected to what makes them them. Their cultures are intact, their connection to their food, their music, their sense of expression, their clothing, um, their religions. They are able to take all of this with them, which I have always emphasized on this very same program that I believe is the source of strength. That is the strength, and that is actually what allows all the other races that we come in contact with to thrive and to succeed, right? Having a sense of identity, having a sense of knowing who you are and where you come from, that is such a powerful theme, right? It's a theme that they use a lot in movies. One of my favorite movies is The Matrix. And throughout the whole movie, Morpheus was really trying to get to Neo that he was the one. But there's something that happens when you actually internalize that and you understand who you are. So, what Esther was talking about, the fact that black people were torn away, right, in the most violent way from their homelands, from their countries, and even afterwards, there was a level of subjugation that needed to take place to make these people who would have had pride in um, themselves for who they were. I've heard stories about some of the slaves who were captured. They were princesses. They were their fathers were chiefs and things like that, right? So you had to literally break. You had to break these people, and this was done through a series of things, but simple things that other races take for granted, like being able to marry. We weren't able to do that. We weren't able to establish families. The women were used like animals for breeding, right? They would put the strongest black slave, female slave, with the strongest black male slave, so that they would make strong babies, so that they would be able to, have slaves to work the plantation and things like that. So when you're dealing with the compounded the compounded results of this, it is what we are left with um, today. And I know it's very easy because I was watching an old video of Gypsy singing, Little Black Boy, go to school and learn. Little Black Boy, show some concern. And while I could understand the song for what it is, I always feel like sometimes these things are there are layers of it that are missing, you know. So yeah, I feel like as we go on today and we talk about these things, I feel like that is where my perspective is going to be uh, coming from. I wanted to be fair, so I searched, how long was the Holocaust, and it was 12 years in all. It was horrific, it was terrible, but it was 12 years. Black people were enslaved for centuries, for centuries. So you're thinking about the complete erasure of your culture, the adoption of a new one. Your posture would have changed in terms of um, whereas a lot of people talk about, you should get up and get and whatnot, and I totally agree. But for 400 years, or for however long people were enslaved, you were told when to sleep, when to work, where to work, who to marry if you could marry, what to eat, because you were given the master's scraps or whatnot. That would have over time developed a dependency, as terrible as it was. So I think we need to talk about all these things and why we have what we have today. And maybe we could probably try to discuss what would it actually take to break that, um, and to move forward. So that is my introduction. A little long, but I think I just wanted to lay a very honest foundation if we're going to be having this conversation. So that's it for me, Esther.
Indeed, indeed. And no, it wasn't long because, like I shared before, we are going to commit the month of August to talk about the African community in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean because, like you rightfully said, the Africans who come to our countries now or go to the UK, America, even right here in Trinidad, the true Africans who are not mixed breed or who didn't come through the slave line, they come with their culture. They very much have a community by themselves because I was invited, to be among some of them within the last couple of years. And they have their food. That's how I was able to taste jollof rice and fell in love with it. Understand the goosey soup and all these different things because they do their pong yam. They have their little stores that has their ingredients that comes. And while eating the food and enjoying that fellowship with them, I realized that we have missed out so much of our culture and our food and that togetherness that they have. You understand? So what they portray us to be as Caribbean African people is so far from what they are. And I mean, they do embrace us, understanding that we came here through the slave master. Somehow, the dress code, I have always loved their garments, the way their clothing looks, the material, the designs. They are so very intelligent people. We have a lot of them right here in Trinidad in our university who are lecturers and so on, who are doctors and this and that. And you know, we were not aware of these type of individual. As a matter of fact, Hadassah, as a child growing up, we were told that Africa was a poor place, a place of poverty. They used to refer to us as monkeys. If you, I don't know if you ever went through that, but you heard those talk before. Africa is a place of poverty and it's nasty and it's a set of bush and you know there is no electricity. It's a dungeon place. And
Yeah.
because there was no should I say network like we have today, internet and all these things, you were not privy to nothing except for what they were telling us. All right. And then when you started to become missionaries with different religious uh, communities and so on, and you start going to Africa and you start going to certain places, then you realize that it was far from the truth that we were told. And today we are exposed and we see Africa as our mother nation. And I recall, if I am recalling correctly, I think recently there was a statement made with respect to opening up the air flights from the Caribbean to Africa, straight from the Caribbean to Africa. So we don't have to look for a visa for America and now, well,
Yeah.
UK, to go there first and then to go to Africa. And there were a lot of people, African people, who really wanted, who expressed their delight and wanting to go to Africa. And there were people making comments like, why you want to go there? That is a poor place and to catch your ass more. And they were actually making those comments on social media. And I was like, we are so ignorant of the facts. And I mean, yes, we are Caribbean people, but our roots are from Africa. Our foreparents, their neighbors were buried in Africa. Our blood streams is from Africa, just like you have those of the Indian descent who will talk about India and wanting to go there and wanting to be a part of India. It's the same thing with the African. Why deny us or why ridicule us as though we shouldn't feel like we want to go to our motherland? We shouldn't feel like we want to be there to experience what it's like, to experience our culture, to experience our food. You know, I started
Yeah.
making my African food because you see it now on YouTube and all these different food, and it is so tasty. It is much more
Yes.
healthy than what the European has brought to us. And I remember
Yeah.
talking to African people, and let me tell you, they say we eat spirit food. True Africans, the bread that we use and those juice, they don't indulge in those things. As a matter of fact, the real Africans, they drink a lot of water and they eat heavy in the morning. They don't know anything about tea and bread. They don't know about those things. And when they talk about bread, is not those bread you get from Kiss and Quelo and all those nonsense that you could take a whole bag and squeeze it together and it becomes like nothing in your hand. When they talk about bread over there, Hadassah, I remember my grandparents making bread in what we call dirt oven. And those bread were heavy. When you cut a couple slices that fills you up. Nothing like what you have today. And you know, I've grown to appreciate the fact that their culture is rich. The dance, Hadassah, is so, we would say it is so, what's the word? Is it spicy? I mean, somebody would say the way they wiggle and they, you know, I mean, when you look at them, you feel it. You want to be a part of the rhythm that they express and the type of dance. It is totally different to these European dance. Now, I love ballroom dancing and I love those things. That is what we grew up and knew. But when you see the African dance, you may tell yourself they're so wild, they behave in, and I've heard it like animals. But that is how they express themselves. They have that level of energy. They are strong people, strong build. They're in the 50s, 60s, and they're flinging up in the air. They're flipping over. We can't do that when we reach, must be 30. We don't have
Yeah.
that type of energy. You understand? Excuse me. So it tells us something. And the Europeans, they took that away from us.
Yeah.
Whereas our Indian brothers and sisters, our Chinese, our Syrian brothers and sisters, they all came with their culture. They came with their music. They came with their song. They came with their language. They, listen, they took away our language. When I
Yeah.
listen to how my African brothers who are in Africa, they have so many different languages. And you know, they talk very fast. And it pains me to know that all of this was taken away from us. And they still speak English. Okay? They still speak English and some part they speak French. But something needs to be done for those who are willing to want to understand your culture, wants to understand, besides the fact that we were created in the image and likeness of God. You want to understand where you came from, where your ancestors come from, why you get these feelings and these longings, and then you realize it is because of where your ancestors came from. From a young person, Hadassah, before, I mean, now you have a lot of African clothing. But before we had a lot of African clothing, we just had some simple African prints. I remember buying it at Jimmy Aboud in Port of Spain, some little African prints. And I would always gravitate to that and go and, you know, you went to high school and they taught you, you did home economics and home ec and all these different things. You learn to sew, you learn to cook. And I would make these African clothing from a very young person. And then as you grow older and you see the garbs that came into our country, people going and coming and bringing the African clothing were very expensive. So at one point in time, even though I liked them, I wasn't able to afford them, right? But now it's different. And I'm saying all of this because there is something inside of us that is longing to know our roots, but we were deprived from that. And
Yeah.
I don't care who is upset or who think that we shouldn't be talking about it. I am of African descent. One of the things that sometimes irritates me is when they talk about black people. All of us in Trinidad and Tobago is black, but we are of different races, different descent. All right? When they refer to the Indians, they say Indian, but Indians in Trinidad are also considered black. Okay? So we have to be careful and we got, listen, unity is power, you know. And if only the African community persons who are of influence and who are in business can come together and really not to come together in any pride to look down on anybody else, but to allow us to know and to understand who we are. The authority that is in us naturally, because we are basically strong built individuals. Okay? Except for those of us now who are mixed up with all different type of races, because I mean my father grandparents, great grandparents, they came from Scotland. So you realize that this is why they say we are Kalaloo people, because we are not pure African, we are mixed. So that is why the Africans sometimes would say we are not true Africans. And they're correct, because we are mixed with so many different races in the Caribbean. But yet, we want to know. We need to know. I think it is the only race, Hadassah, that is mixed up the way we are mixed up. Because the Indians are not mixed up for the masses of them. You may have a few who are, but for the masses of them. The Chinese are not. The Syrians are not. And now we have the Venezuelans. Okay? We are the only race that is mixed up like Real Kalaloo, because we have, when they brought us here, like you would have said, they would have done whatever they felt they wanted to do with us. So, based on that, I want to dedicate the month of August through Real Talk Corner to the African community. And we would be bringing in a lot of guests as from next week, God's willing, to help us understand. And I'm talking about not just Trinidadians, Africans. I would be bringing persons who are coming straight from Africa, talking to us from Africa, letting us know a little bit about our culture back in Africa, a little bit of which tribe we believe came to the Caribbean, and more so the ones that settled in Trinidad. We need to know. I think it is important for us to know.
Indeed. Um, well, you said so much there, Esther. I'll be looking forward to those conversations with those guests. Um, with reference to what you said, I remember when the comment was made about, why you want to go to Nigeria. I remember that. And I found it highly offensive because what happened to free will? People could go wherever they want to. Um, but apart from that, I feel like those individuals too, they are also victims of the misinformation that we have been fed for decades, right? For as long as I have known Western media, there has always been a certain conversation surrounding Africa. And you are right. So you'd be up and late at night, you'd be seeing some white guy standing up in front of huts and children with flies on their belly and looking hungry and starving and saying, this is Africa and they're poor and they're needy and whatnot. And they've always
Well,
sold us a particular narrative. And I always think about that. I'm like, even the accounts of slavery, some of it has come through the lens of European people. And I always think about why was it so important to paint Africa in that light? Um, And why has it always been so important to villainize everything that comes from Africa as well? So I feel like as a whole, we have matured a lot. And I think the exposure that we have got from the internet through YouTube and whatnot, you've been wanting and yearning more to interact with content that is about Africa because you're seeing now that they have been lying to us. You're seeing that there are a lot of cities in Africa that are highly developed, um, and they are leading in certain things in certain industries, and you're seeing that the music, the musicality, the dancing, everything that comes from Africa, you're realizing now that even when you listen to our music or the music that has filtered down over the centuries, that the source of it, the inspiration has always been Africa, you know. And while yes, we were stripped away from our homeland and whatnot, you realize too that our food in Trinidad, Creole food in Trinidad, you can see so many similarities. You can say, okay, this looks like it's a derivative of this dish and whatnot. So you're seeing that the influences that has passed on over the years. But I've always wondered, why was it so necessary that white people tell us certain things about where we come from, right? And I always feel like that right there is the key, because there are things that they don't want us to know. There are things about us, who we are as a people, our strength, our dynamism. There are things that they did not want us to know. And everything then had to be shrouded in lies. So they had to lie and tell us that the way that Africans worship and things like that. They had to tell us that it was evil, and that they had to tell us that we are wild and that we come from animals and whatnot. And they've had to do these things. They've had to paint Africa in a certain light so that the rest of the Western world that has benefited so much from Africa could justify in their minds that it was okay for them to do certain things from us. When you go to the museum in London and you realize that all the artifacts and all the pieces and all the art is stolen, it is stolen, you realize that, yeah, they had to tell us certain things about who we are. They had to even give us an inferiority complex. They had to make us even hate ourselves, not be curious about where we come from or who we are, because they know that once we uncover the truth, that then we will become unstoppable. And I really honestly believe that, right? There is something about us as a people, and this is the positive now. There's something about us as a people that the light in us causes everybody to hate us, right? No matter where we go, no matter where we go. And while you would find that there are different races who will experience pockets of racism here and there, whatnot, they all collectively gang up to hate us, right? Which always blows my mind. It always blows my mind. But then I always feel like these are the things that you need to reflect on, the why. The why. And I feel like if we could tap into the why, why it is that that has been so necessary, why there has been millions of money spent on media propaganda to tell us this is what Africa is and this is who you are, right? So it's a very interesting an interesting conversation. I know that I have had to do my own internal work, because even in Trinidad, you suffer. We still have the remnants of colonialism, the ideas of certain black people were better than others based on the hue of their skin, which would have originated from the mulattoes or the light skinned slaves who would have worked in the slave master's house and things like that. So we still have the remnants of that in our society today. I remember in school being teased mercilessly for my complexion and things like that. So it took a lot of self work to come to the point where it was like, well, this is who I am, this is how God made me, and find the ability to love yourself regardless, right? Other people don't really have to struggle with that. I mean, I know that generally, um, white standards of beauty has actually infiltrated all cultures, right? But it has not affected them the way that we do. We are the ones who have significantly different shades and complexions. We have different texture hair. There are things about us that just stand out, right? Our features, depending on the tribe that you come from, looks very, very different. Some people have really broad noses and things like that. And we have been picked apart as a people, and people have found many, many reasons over the centuries as to why we were not worthy, why we were not good enough, why we were not beautiful, and things like that. So the journey of embracing who you are, or just developing that curiosity to know who you are, has to go through many stages. You have to go through, yearning. You have to want to know who you are. You have to love yourself, and things like that. And I feel like what is happening in Trinidad is a lot of people have not begun the journey, right? I feel like the sense of chaos that seems to permeate the African community, it is because a lot of people have not begun their journey to really understand, uh, who we are and who they are and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll be looking forward to the this month of conversation, because I feel like it will be very enriching, very enlightening, for sure. That I feel like there's so much that we can learn and that we can glean from it. Um, and I feel like after we go through all the ugliness and things like that, I feel like we could really focus on the things that really make us special. I was even thinking about, I didn't even know what the topic was today, right? But I was thinking about the fact that uh, they talk about the fact that African people sold African people into slavery. And that is part of the story, is a small part of the story. But the bigger part of it is that as a race, we have always been so welcoming. So when the Europeans came to the African shores, the chiefs and stuff, the heads of the tribes, welcomed them, and they started to talk about, well, what do we have and what do you have, and let's exchange and things like that. So it actually started with us just being open and welcoming. I don't know how much that has served us as a people, but that is something that you could never take away from us. I know if I go into an interview, um, and the person who is interviewing me doesn't look like me, I would have to worry. I know if I go into an interview and the person looks like me, I may worry still, because I know he is going to consider me, but he's also going to consider everybody, black, white, Indian, just the same. We are not as tribal as other races. We have always looked out and loved and embraced everybody. And I feel like, oh my gosh, those are one of our strengths. The way that we love people, the way that we care for people, you could never, ever, ever take that away from us. So I'm looking forward to
Indeed,
exploring all of
correct, indeed, and
that.
that is so true. But you know what? As you were talking, I remember a good friend I had years ago, and she was an Indian woman, but we were so good together as friends. And I remember asking her, I said, why is it that, because in my home, in my community where I was brought up, there were more Indians than Africans, okay? And I am accustomed eating the sada roti, they eat our bread, we eat dal rice and bhaji, they eat our stewed chicken and macaroni pie and rice, that kind of thing. We always exchanging our food. When we bake bread, they get a bread, they give you their roti, and so on and so on. So, as you grow and you get older, you want to know what this racial thing is all about. My first boyfriend was an Indian, and I guess because I grew up among the Indians, and I could never forget that it hurt so much that his parents didn't want him to be with me. And when
Yeah,
I
yeah,
asked him why, he said, promise that you would never say anything because they see you all as niggers. So I said, what was nigger? Because at that time, we wasn't too familiar. We grew up with one another in the same community. We eat together. So what is all of this about? And I remember asking my very good lady friend about it. I said, I'm not going to call her name, but, you know, why is it that, you can be good friends with one another, but when it comes to your children getting married to an African person, you all go against it, and you do anything if it means you have to kill the African person, you will do it. Why is that? And the answer didn't make sense to me. but I understood. All right? They are tightly knitted together. They want to keep their culture and their family together without mixing the blood. Put it that way. All right? So whilst you have now, of course, now you have a lot of Africans and Indians coming together and getting married and having the Douglas children and all of that a few years ago. In my era, it wasn't too much like that. And they will go to the length and the breadth to ensure that their sons or daughters didn't marry to African. And if their son or daughter insists, because I know of some of them who actually ran away, disinherited themselves to get to marry to this woman or man that they're in love with, and their parents would disown them. If they have whatever property and whatever, they will take their names off because they married to an African person. And I always wondered why, because we are all human beings, but as you grow older, as you get into the corporate world, as you get in, dealing with people, you realize that it is an intimidation. It is because nothing is wrong with the African brothers and sisters. Their background is different, and so is the Indian brothers and sisters. Their background is different, and we have to learn to appreciate other people's culture and background. But somehow, well, we don't even have a culture, and I think that is one of the reasons. Because we, as Africans, we don't have a culture. So what is there for them to appreciate? When we appreciate their culture, because they have something. I remember my last daughter going to a Hindu school, and she used to come home, and her peers have Indian have long hair, and she would take cloth or the towel and put it around her head and clip it up and pretend she has long Indian hair, and then she will dance to the Indian music because, they would have the puja in the prayers in the school and so on and so on. And, family members and others would tell me, why are you sending your child to an Indian school? And I always felt comfortable, Hadassah. You see the statement you made about going for an interview, and you know that if you see your same kind, they may take you, but more than likely they're going to consider everybody. When it comes to the Indian community, and I am not saying this to degrade anybody or whatever, I think that is something that we as Africans needs to emanate. We need to always hold on to our people, look after our people. And they do it, all right? And she would go, her friends, all her friends were Indian. And therefore she would go Diwali time, they go to light diyas together. And I never saw anything wrong with that, because remember, even though we as Africans were brought up, most of us, in the church, either it's Pentecostal, Baptist, because I don't think in the early days the Anglican and the Catholic would have embraced us as they would embrace the white, the Syrians, or even the Indians. They would not embrace us. If you recall, in Dr. Eric William, deceased Dr. Eric William time, I think it was difficult for African people to be a part of the school that he attended, to be employee in the banks and all of that. If you go through history, I can't go through all of that now, but African people were always left out. And I say it's nothing more than intimidation, because if we are exposed to education and to whatever, we are very bright people. But for the masses of the African children, I grew up in a very poor family, but I had a level of ambition as a young person growing up. I always wanted to be somebody. I didn't like what I would hear the Indian brothers and sisters saying about the African, or even the Africans themselves, what they would say about their own African people. So I always say, I am going to challenge that. I will not be a poor citizen in this country. And I don't have to go to America to become rich. And that was my desire, and it happened. I went to America after, when things started to happen in a particular way. And let me tell you this, as an African person, once you start climbing the ladder, everybody start looking at you, and your own people who should be proud and happy for you climbing the ladder, they are the ones who bring you down. And that is where I think that talk of we are like crabs in a bucket, always pulling down each other. So, I am not perturbed or upset about the other race. I actually make that something to look up to. I actually emanate. I tell young African people, look at how the Indians operate. They go to school, they learn, they have their group study together, they encourage, they show. I say, what goes on with you? You come from school, you want to look at comedy and you want to look at stupidness, you want to go and lie by the corner. When we hear the other races talking about us in the negative, don't get upset about it. That should be the clue and the cue for you to come together, come and study and prove them wrong. Prove them wrong. But instead, we go on the streets and we are the gangsters. Our children and grandchildren are the ones who are there filling the pockets of the 1% and whoever else, because they bring all these foolish clothes and toys. Christmas is coming, a whole lot of nonsense. And who goes and buy it? We, the African people, more than anybody else. Or, let me say, the poor class people. So the people who are Indians and Africans, who are poor, and now when you see some of the Venezuelans come, they look to have those things for their children. But Hadassah, the European, the 1%, the Chinese, you see any Chinese shopping in any store? You ever walk in a store and really see any multitude of Chinese? You might see one. You see Chinese in bank. You don't see Chinese associating with us. They have their own association. And I am not saying this for us to be segregated. No. What I'm saying, it is time for the African community to arise. Open your understanding. We are only limited by the things that we are allowed to limit us. Open up your understanding. We have intelligence. We don't have the support. And I must say this because I promise not to talk too much about politics for this month, but I must say this, even when our present Prime Minister was in office before as the Prime Minister, she would have given opportunities to some of our African brothers and sisters, put them in a position to help us. But Hadassah, they never did. They never helped us. The African people who were placed in position to help us, they didn't. As a matter of fact, they looked down on us and they helped others because they wanted benefits. But I think and I believe the time has come now for us to really make it an agenda, those of us who know better. And it's not going to be an easy road. I don't even know if at this point, with this new government, she is still the Prime Minister, if we would get those opportunities again, not to just give individual a stipend or give an NGO something. We need to establish a cooperative for black citizens. We need to come together. We need to train them, not just give $1 million or $2 million and say, look, go and do something. No, we have to get a team of African people who understand the culture of Africa, who understand the language, who understand what is needed for us to appreciate our patriarchs and for us to be edified or empowered with that information, and then to bring us together like the small business African persons and really help them, because they're not stupid. And I would say this, I think my time is running out, but I'm going to say this. Even in the credit unions today, when you go for a loan as an African person, and I'm not talking what somebody tell me because I've been there, the Indian person or a different race is going to come with almost the same perspective, the same business plan, and sometimes with less capital than the African is going to have. But you know what? They will not give the African what they're asking for. They might cut it in half and say if they ask for 60,000, give them 30,000. And in their heart, they know already from the time you do that, that is the opportunity for them to fail. But you would give the other race the 60,000 that they're asking for. And these are the things that I am talking about. They will tell you, well, start up with this, and after you would come, and when we see how you're progressing and get the rest. They don't do it with the other race, but they'll do it with the African race, knowing that that is the remedy or the recipe for failure. If I put my business plan together and I know it is going to cost 60,000 for me to get it off the ground and probably have a 2 months or 3 months in hand to do what I have to do, why would you want to give me 30,000? And that is a recipe for failure, and that means that it is not going to work. So these are the things that I have been exposed to, and I am saying we as the African community, we have to come together. Forget about the negatives. The positive here is for understanding who you are, understanding the ability that is within you, and stop pointing fingers at anybody and let us come together as a community, because I'm not seeing it happening otherwise. The other races are not going to help us 100% or wholeheartedly. They're going to give us something. I think the only person that is going to do that is our now Prime Minister, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar. She is the only person that is going to consider listening to us and doing something tangible, not what was done before, because clearly those persons didn't care one hoot about the African community. They were concerned about themselves. Some of them didn't even concern about their family member. And the stigma that has been on the African community, they push it down the throat even more and did not try to pull them up out of the gutter. And that is my take. And this is why I want to commit the month of August for us to listen to where we come from the African people, because some of us don't even know what tribe we're from. Like how the Indian brothers and sisters, they can trace back and tell you, well, they came from this tribe, or the Maharaj came from here, and the Suknarayans come from there. We don't have a clue, because what? We don't even have our African names. We mix up. Cruickshank is not an African name, it is a Scottish name. And so for many of us, it's English name, it's whatever name. But most of us who came through slavery, we don't have our African name. So how can we know where we came from? When I talk to my African colleagues abroad in Africa, their name represents so much. They know if they were born on Fridays or Thursdays, as the case may be. We don't know those things. So it is important that the government, even the government of today, reach out and help us to help ourselves. But it has to be with the right thinking people, with the right people who have the right agenda to do something for the African community. Because I've seen it all. And a lot of us, we don't really care about ourselves. We don't care about our community. And I'm saying it's time for us to implement, not like what we had for Black Caucus. That Black Caucus was a Black PNM caucus, right? Because we see how it ended. I am talking about people's agenda to allow the African community to be empowered with truth about who they are, where we came from, and where we're supposed to be going. Because that is what is important, right? The gangs is African. The scammers, most of them, is African. What is wrong with us as a people? Because we lost. We are totally lost. We don't know who we are. And for those of us who really want to do something, I think the time is now. Let us come together and let us talk about it first. We have a lot of African scholars in this country who I know have the history, and we have a lot of Africans from Africa who are lecturers in our university and who are willing to work with us. Some of them are doctors in our health facility and so on. We need to come. We have to make a conscious, deliberate decision to come together and work this thing out. or else we're not going to go anywhere. We're going to continue killing ourselves. And the other race who we know is bringing the drugs and the guns and giving it to our African brothers and sisters to to kill us out so that they can get their lands and their houses. Okay? And we are not the wiser. But I hope and I pray that after the month of August, that a lot of us is going to be empowered. Even the small business African people and those who are influencers on different social media, African people, we need to come together. This is not about pointing fingers at anybody else. I don't care about anybody else. I love everybody else. But right now, we need to focus on the African community, empowering them, our young men, our young women, empowering them not to sell their bodies to one another, but be respectful to each other. All right? And let us really do what is right to see our community of the African people grow. And not just grow for numbers' sake, grow in intelligence, grow understanding what we are supposed to do to go where we want to go. Excuse me.
Indeed. Like, you want me to say
Our
something?
time has our time has
Because I
gone.
thought I was the end.
Well, actually, it is the end because it is now 9 o'clock, and we want to just continue being on for an hour unless we have, something of a little more importance. But again, we are going to be on not Thursday, but Friday. I know Friday is a holiday, and I was saying we would not be on Friday, but because it is Emancipation and because I have a message on Friday to deliver to my African community people, I want to be on Friday, and my producer is willing to do that, and therefore I'm going to be having, try to see if I can, have something really special for our Africans. Start off Emancipation Day with something valuable, something strong, something that is going to make us think as an African person, whether you're young, middle age, older, because we need the older ones to help us as the younger ones. And then, of course, for the balance of August, I'm going to be having persons who is going to enlighten us, empower us, even things that I may not know. I think I would be getting the opportunity to listen to and to know as we go forward. I think the time is now for us to arise, for us to be wise, for us to stop spending our money foolishly, learn to, to manage ourselves, manage our finances, manage the way we were conditioned to think and to see things. We need to deal with all of that. Manage our anger and our temper. Manage who we put ourselves together with. I know a lot of us have already been influenced badly, but I pray and trust that it can turn around when we listen and pay attention, because even if we start with a handful and we have the right attitude, the right agenda, we are going to grow. And this is in no way to point fingers at anybody else or to feel that we are better than anybody else or to think that they rob us. Yes, they may have robbed us of our identity, robbed us of what belongs to us, but we would throw that behind our backs and go forward now. Come together, go forward. Let us be intentional about throwing all the negatives of every other race that say what they want to say, where Trinidad and Tobago is concerned. And let us come together, plan how we are going to go about it, how we are going to invest our money and our time to see our young African people understand where they came from, understand their culture, understand their language, understand what their food are, and get accustomed. I want to see community development have cooking course for African food. Just have cooking for courses given for the Indian food, for Chinese food. I never heard of the African food. So I want to see things like that happening. And if it cannot happen through government agency, we would put it together, because it is time for us to stop being naive. It is time for us to stop being dotish with foolishness, and get to know ourselves. Let our young people come together. It wouldn't be an easy road, but those of us who are talking about it and are willing to come together, let us do that. All right? So, Hadassah, I want to wish you a really good evening before I say goodbye to our viewers. I trust that they enjoyed this episode, and I trust that, they're going to look forward to Friday and also to the coming weeks in the month of August, where Real Talk Corner is dedicating its segments to the African community empowerment. And that's what I want to call it, the African community empowerment. We want to empower ourselves and empower those of us who needs to be empowered. And of course, my Indian brothers and sisters of the Indian community, we love you all. This is a place where we got to do it together. Okay? We spend our money wherever we want. I've heard certain people say they ain't going by the nigger to buy, or they ain't going by the coolie to buy. All those nonsense. We need to change that. We are all one people of different race, yes, but we are one people. All we are asking is for us to get to know our culture, our language, our food, where we came from, so we would operate in a different environment, a different enlightenment. When you know who is your mother and father, Hadassah, you feel good. But if you as a child, ask any person who grew up and didn't know who was their father and their mother, and they'll tell you how they feel. You feel lost. You don't even understand if there's any trait that you are experiencing came from your father or came from your mother. And that is so important for us today. So I want to thank all of our viewers. I want to thank again my co-host. I want to thank my producer. And I want to thank all of you who have made it possible to be on with us tonight. Look forward to seeing you all on Friday. Remember, we would not be on Thursday night, but definitely on Friday, the 1st of August. Looking forward to have a good time, good session with you all. Goodbye.